Hello and welcome to the Leveraging AI podcast, the podcast that shares practical, ethical ways to leverage AI to improve efficiency, grow your business, and advance your career. Today's episode is going to be a little different as I'm going to deep dive even deeper into the main topics. And there's not going to be enough time to go through all the rapid fire news. So I'm going to pick very few of them. And even on those, I'm going to be very short. So we have three main topics to talk about. One, the first two are somehow interconnected, which is the rise of China in this race. And in some cases, they are ahead of the US right now, which is the biggest news of this week. Then we're going to talk about deepfakes, and you'll see shortly why these two things are connected. And then we're going to dive into how AI is impacting the workforce in surprising ways. And then we're going to have time for a few rapid fire items and we will be done for today. So lots of interesting things to talk about, not necessarily a lot of things to talk about. So let's get started. As I mentioned, our first topic is the rise of China. We've been talking about the race between the US and China for a very long time, but for a very long time, US models were ahead and the Chinese models were able to come very close or in very narrow cases with very narrow margins on a very specific topic, maybe beat the US models on one or two benchmarks, but overall, the US was ahead. The Chinese models' benefits was that they were significantly cheaper to create and significantly cheaper to run, which means they were a great alternative for the larger US models, especially that most or maybe even all the Chinese models are open source, which means you can run them on your own box more or less safely, despite the fact they're coming from China. So that gave a great cheap alternative to companies or individuals who wanted to run powerful AI on a budget, but they were still behind. And there were many, many questions and many senior leaders of the US labs that says that they believe that China will break and will be able to lead in the race. They just weren't sure where and when. We heard Dario Amodei speak very bluntly about the fact that we should not be selling advanced NVIDIA chips to China because that's going to help them close the gap and potentially pass us. We know that for now, NVIDIA has an approval to sell H200 chips, which are significantly more powerful than the chips they were able to get before. The first batch is supposed to come online in the next few weeks. So that's going to be the first time the Chinese will be able to train models on more powerful NVIDIA chips. They're still not their latest chips, but there's still a very serious pushback against selling these chips to China. And there's a lot of discussions in the Capitol Hill as far as whether to cancel that capability for them to get these chips, at least legally. Well, for the Chinese New Year, we're getting more and more new Chinese models. One of the biggest news, which comes more or less exactly 1 year from the original DeepSeek moment, DeepSeek has just upgraded the context window of their current model from 128,000 tokens to 1 million tokens. That is a very big jump, and it makes it the Chinese model with the largest context window there is out there right now, aligned with Opus 4.6 as an example. Very significant jump in the context window. And if you compare it to the original DeepSeek version 3, so now it's 3.2, but the original DeepSeek version 3 had only 64,000 token context window, 3.2 had 128,000 tokens, and now it is not exactly clear, but I think it's still the same model, just with a much larger context window. But DeepSeek version 4 is supposed to be released sometime in the next few weeks and potentially before this podcast even goes live, maybe in the next few days. And version 4 has been delayed for a very, very long time. So we had different variants of version 3 for a while now. And my guess is that DeepSeek is preparing something big and significant as far as their next model, as they have done with version 3. It will be very interesting to see when this model comes out, how good it is, and does it really break ahead of US models. Another big release this week comes from a company called Zipu, which has released GLM-5, which is a massive large language model for a really small company. So it has 744 million parameters. It's an open source language model, and it is another private agency, so none of the big giant players, that is able to generate a solid large language model It does not compete with the frontier US models, but it is aligned with the previous version of models from the US at a fraction of the cost. The other interesting parameter about this is this model was trained 100%, at least as far as what they say, on GPUs generated in China and not generated by NVIDIA. And so it is a capable model, again, not top of the line model, but a capable model that was trained purely on Chinese hardware and software capabilities. Minimax, which has been around for a while as a private, smaller company, has also released a new model called M2.5. This is the first top to bottom multimodal model that is achieving really high scores on multiple benchmarks. It is, again, not top of the line model, but it is aligned with Claude Sonnet 3.5 and GPT-4o and these kind of models across multiple benchmarks. And it is actually really, really good at complex multi-step reasoning tasks, better than that generation of US models, and it's released as full open weights and open source model that anybody can use however they wish. And like all the other Chinese models, it is significantly cheaper to run than most of the US models. That means, by the way, that China right now has three independent smaller labs, DeepSeek, ZPU, and Minimax, that are producing models that are not at the frontier, but are pretty freaking close. And again, there's a very good chance that DeepSeek version 4 will be aligned or in many cases ahead of the top models in the world. And that adds to obviously the big players in China like Alibaba and ByteDance that are doing really interesting things, which is a great segue. Now, if you're asking yourself, how can really small labs generate models that are close to the frontier, is twofold. One is they're training them significantly cheaper than the US models. If you remember the DeepSeek moment, there was discussions that they trained the entire model at a $5.6 million investment. It was obvious afterwards that that wasn't taking into account some other components that needs to be taken into account, and then they were distilling US models, but it doesn't really matter the fact that they are actually doing it significantly cheaper. And when I'm saying significantly cheaper, we're talking 2 or 3 orders of magnitude cheaper than the US companies are training the large leading models right now. However, the other thing that became known this week is that the Chinese government funds that are managed by the US government has poured over $15 billion to domestic AI companies just in the first quarter of 2026. And the first quarter of 2026 is not even over. The largest amounts went to DeepSeek and ZPU, and the rest goes divided between most of the other companies. ZPU, by the way, is planning to go public at a $10 to $15 billion valuation, which is going to make it a very large IPO for a relatively small and young company. Now, by funding the innovation of AI in both hardware and software, the Beijing government is ensuring that the Chinese lab can continue to advance the Chinese capabilities in the AI arms race. And they're obviously getting a cut in the eyes and a complete view into what's happening in these companies so they can use the technology for the government's needs. Now, not surprisingly, a significant chunk of that state funding goes to building domestic AI hardware, compute, and GPUs that will enable China to run independently of the US. The Chinese government has described AI self-sufficiency as, and I'm quoting, core national security priority, and they understand exactly what the US government understands and any other government in the world right now, that the AI's race is going to play a very big role in future supremacy, and hence they're investing a lot of money, and they will invest as much as they need in order to get that. We also know that China has built a very significant capacity on the electricity generation side, and they are leading the world right now in that, which gives them extra bandwidth in order to be able to compete in a more aggressive way. On the US, by the way, there is a push currently in the White House to put out a bill that will force, in a collaborative way, the main labs to pick up the tab for any new electrical infrastructure in order to reduce to zero the increase in cost or issues to the grid by paying for any new electrical capacity that needs to come online. I think this is a very smart bill. It will be interesting to see how this actually turns out. But The biggest news of this week when it comes to China actually comes from ByteDance. ByteDance is the company behind TikTok, and ByteDance just released a new video model called Cdance 2.0, which is their next generation AI model. And this AI model is way ahead of the models that were released by the West right now. So it is the first time that a Chinese company is not releasing something that is maybe competing on specific benchmarks, but that is clearly, both in means of the performance of the output as well as the underlying technology, ahead of everything anybody else in the world has, including the leading companies in the US, such as Sora from OpenAI or Veo3 from Google, etc. It is a very unique model because it has two very interesting things that, again, do not exist in any other model right now. The first one, it has a quad modality input system, which means you can provide inputs to the system in text, images, audio, and video all at the same time. Meaning, when you create a new scene or a new movie or a new segment, you can do that with different inputs to direct the model to do the right thing. The other half is at least as interesting because Cdance 2.0 is the first model that knows how to process visual and audio streams in parallel at the same time, fusing them into one coherent and amazing output. So all the models that we know right now that include sound in their outputs, such as Veo and Sora and Runway and a few others, the way they do this is the sound gets added in post-processing. In other words, one model generates the video and then it goes back to the beginning, and another model generates the audio and try to do the lip sync and the background noise and so on. And in Cdance, it happens at once seamlessly, which means it understands exactly what's happening in each frame in order to generate the sound in real time as it's happening. This is a very significant jump forward. In addition, it comes with a very solid control over multiple parameters, which really takes you from a creator that needs to experiment a lot to a Hollywood director that controls everything that's happening in every single scene in a very detailed way. ByteDance is claiming a 90+% usable rate for generated clips, meaning that 9 out of 10 outputs require minimal or no editing for professional use. To give you an understanding what that means, the industry benchmark right now is between 20 to 40%, which means you have to generate a video between 2 to 5 times in order to get the output you want. I can tell you that in many cases that is more than that because I've generated multiple videos. So going to a 90% success rate and getting a clip to do exactly what you want, including sound, is incredible. Now, when I tell you it generates sounds, it generates any sound that is required for the scene. That means synchronized lips for dialogues. It means ambient sound and music. All of it gets created when the video gets created, and the output is absolutely stunning. There's already thousands of videos online showing really amazing scenes generated by this model. And to make it even more attractive, it is also significantly cheaper than the US competition, such as Runway and Veo and Sora. Now, this model is going to catch like wildfire for two different reasons. One, everything that I mentioned so far, it's an incredible model. But as importantly, ByteDance, as I mentioned, is the owner of TikTok that has potentially the largest creator community in the world. And these creators are eager to try these kind of tools. And that means that immediately across a massive creator base, we're going to get a flood of AI-generated videos that are indistinguishable from real life. Now, the combination of its ability to keep consistency of video angles, scene, characters, etc., together with low price and with full sound will mean that we're going to get most likely more AI-generated videos in the relatively near future, and most likely this year on TikTok, and then I'm sure afterwards with all the other video platforms, then we're going to get real videos that are created and uploaded to these platforms. So why is this the number one topic for this week? There are two reasons. Reason number one is that it is a significant moment in the history of the AI race because it is the first time that a Chinese company comes out with a model that is much better very clearly, both in the outputs as well as in the underlying technology, than the leading US models. The other reason this is critical, and it may be the most important part of this, is the fact that now any person in the world with extremely low budget can generate any video of anything that is completely undistinguishable from real life. Now, this is becoming scarier and scarier. And to be fair, I felt like this 3 years ago. If you go back to episode 13 of this podcast, the episode was called The Truth is Dead. And what is the basic premise? The basic premise is that our society, any society, is built on trust in communication. You trust that what people tell you, that what governments tell you, that what organizations tell you, that what the news and media tells you, that what books tell you is real. And the reality is right now, this trust is broken. You cannot know what is real and what is not on digital media, which means you cannot trust anything in communication. And that trust is the fabric of any society. So what's going to happen next? I'm not sure. If you want to make it even more interesting, we're going into a mid-election year in the US, which means it will be very, very easy to convince people or sway people's minds in one direction or the other. Now, this is not new. Governments have done this for generations, and large companies did lots of large media campaigns to convince us in one thing or another. But now any individual, and definitely small groups, can generate massive amount of fake news and content to sway people in their direction. And that is really scary to me. Now, a little bit of the backlash or what's happening with CDANs, with what's happening in that arena right now. Well, the first thing that happened is that the Motion Picture Association, the MPA, and SAG-AFTRA, which is the Screen Actors Guild of American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and major studios are issuing formal legal action and very strong statements against the use of CDANs 2 of known characters, of known leading actors inside videos that are generated by CDANs 2.0. Maybe the most viral version is an incredible scene of Tom Cruise fighting Brad Pitt on a roof of a semi-collapsed building overlooking a town in the background. It is an incredible scene. It is practically impossible to know that it is AI generated, and it is all generated by CDANs. So obviously there's a very strong protest from the leading Hollywood studios and the actors guilds, etc., in what they are characterizing as an existential threat to creative professionals. In addition to their immediate cry, they are now working very aggressively, and they're calling for immediate regulatory action to block models to illegally use the IP and the likelihood of leading actors and or cartoon generated in the Disney case that is being generated by the models right now, and especially by a Chinese model that has no rights to do so. The MPA issued a formal statement warning that AI video generation models pose a fundamental threat to intellectual property rights and the likelihood of creative professionals. That's the exact language. Fran Drescher, the SAG-AFTRA president, called for an emergency negotiation with the technology companies, stating that members' likeness are being exploited without compensation or consent. Screenwriter Rhett Reese commented, and I'm quoting, "We've crossed a line where anyone's face can be used to say or do anything, and that should terrify every creative professional. I would say, as I mentioned before, that should terrify anybody, period." In an interesting move, Disney announced it would pursue legal action against platforms that are hosting the AI-generated content. Basically, they know it will be very hard for them to go after the labs that are generating them, especially if they're in China. But if you're in the US and you want to watch this video and it's hosted somewhere, that would be illegal as well, or at least that's what Disney is trying to do. And I actually think that's not a bad idea. Now, this situation is fueling a No Fakes Act in Congress that is being now pushed forward from multiple angles, but this has definitely been an accelerator to that, which is a requirement from the federal government to protect the digital likeness of individuals and the IP of groups and companies. Multiple states have already introduced similar kind of laws and yet limited to either the state or a specific thing, with California proposed a bill that specifically targets AI video generation tools that can create realistic depictions of real individuals without their consent. Now, going back to the movie and television industry, industry analysts now estimate with these new capabilities that these tools can eliminate 100,000 to 200,000, creating jobs in the industry within 3 years if it's not heavily regulated. Now, early last year, I predicted that by the end of last year, we're going to have miniseries that is created 100% by AI, and that already happened as I predicted. I do think that we are not going to see a full featured long film this year, but I'm guessing we will see them in the next 2 to 3 years. And again, if somebody really aggressive is going to go at it, it might happen this year. But I think we're going to start seeing real videos that are going to make it to cinemas or at least to streaming channels that are going to be 100% generated by AI. That means that a small group of creatives can take a budget of a few tens of thousands of dollars and create videos that will be competing and in some cases better than Hollywood productions at a fraction of the cost that Hollywood can do this. Why am I saying they could be better? Because the AI generation gives you a lot more freedom, creative freedom, to do whatever you want. That is really hard to do with real videos, and that is including the capability to create special effects and digital manipulation and so on. Now, in the beginning, I think in the short term, people are still want to see Tom Cruise and Scarlett Johansson and Gal Gadot and all the top leading actors in real videos. But I think over time, what people want to see, they want to see a movie they enjoy or a TV series they enjoy, something that will get them excited or sad and will create whatever emotion they want to have at that point. And I don't think over time they will really care if the actors are humans or AI, as long as the movie or the TV series is great. So in the short term, people might be willing to pay premium for movies and or TV series that are made by and with humans. But sadly, and I'm saying that with deep concerns, I have a feeling that this is not going to stay the norm. And I think that AI generated videos, movies, TV series, etc., will provide much more flexibility and hence much more interesting plots and environments that can be created and with a fraction of the budget. And so if you remember last year, when the actors and the screenwriters signed an agreement with the main Hollywood studios that is preventing them or limiting the amount of AI they can use, I said that is a worthless agreement because once people, other organizations, not the current Hollywood studios, will be able to create full featured films with basically a budget of tens of thousands of dollars, Hollywood is done. If the main studios will not follow suit, they will go out of business. And then it doesn't matter whether the actors had an agreement or not. They would still not be able to have a job and get a job. Now, do I think this is a good thing? No. Do I feel sad for the actors? 100%. Do I want to see the capability to generate movies and TV series with actual humans continue? I would love to see that. However, from a pure financial perspective, I don't see this as a realistic option for the longer run. Now, you want to get another example of this. Novelist Coral Hart has done an interview with the New York Times. She is currently writing under 21 different pen names, and she has produced more than 200 romance novels last year and self-published them on Amazon. Now, none of these books has been a hit on its own, but she has sold over 50,000 copies, raking six figures as an income from writing these books. Now, while being interviewed by Zoom by the New York Times, she has finished producing a book in just 45 minutes. An average human writer doesn't stand a chance. That is what she said, and I agree with her. I had the opportunity to actually sit in a AI community discussion with somebody who does the same thing, not at the same scale. She didn't write 200 novels, she wrote a lot less, but she showed us step by step the exact framework that needs to be put in place. And there's a lot of work to create that environment. But once you have that environment, once you have the machine ready to go, you can create new books, maybe not in 45 minutes, maybe in 2 hours, maybe in 2 days. An average person takes months to write them. And the same kind of story is going to happen for the movie and TV industry. And again, I'm not happy about it. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just stating where we are right now and what is the trajectory, and the outcome of the current trajectory is very clear. But my bigger problem is not even the Actors Guild or the writers and so on, but just the ability to commit fraud and generate fake stuff at scale with zero ability to distinguish from reality. And if you think about how we know what is real and what is not, it is because A, initially we assumed everything is real. I talked about the trust that we talked about before. But B, now even if you question that, what you're going to look for are clues that are going to tell you this is the real thing. As an example, if you're watching a piece of news, is it reported from multiple channels? And also, you're going to check, are there multiple videos of the event? So as an example, if you're going to see a report of something significant happening, you will look and you will see multiple videos of that thing from a helicopter, from the news media, from people with their cell phones filming it on the street, etc. Now, with the new models, even with the existing models, if they don't get any better, you can do this. Tools like Cdance 2.0 allows you to create multiple videos of the same scene from multiple angles shot with different tools. So one of them can be stable and perfect like professional media, and then you can get 4 or 5 or 10 different angles of people shooting the same exact scene with their phones, and it is going to look completely realistic. And if people will put this across multiple channels, then the main media is going to pick it up as well, and then it is going to be reported as news, and it will be a while before somebody catches it is not news. And at that time, the harm is already done, because even if they roll back and say, oh, sorry, this is not real, we picked up a fake story, not all the people that saw the original story will see that this is not the real story. And now you understand where this is going. Not to mention people that can do actual real deepfake fraud that is happening at scale right now. So global losses from AI-enabled fraud reached 442 billion in 2025, based on a Deloitte's Global Finance Crime Report. Their projections are suggesting we're going to exceed 600 billion by 2027. Maybe the most known case, which we reported on when it happened, is the Arup incident, where criminals used real-time deepfakes. So you change the face and the voice of a person that is talking in real time on a Zoom call to impersonate a company's CFO, and that confirmed to a controller in a different country to release $25.5 million bank transfer to their bank account, because the CFO that they know and that they work with, the one that runs the financial team that they belong to, that they've been on meetings on before, told them to do so as a payment to a specific client. Similar attacks have targeted financial institutions, with one bank reporting 47 separate deepfake fraud attempts in a single quarter. Now, to tell you how bad the situation is, there's now this phenomena of DaaS platform. If you're asking yourself what the hell DaaS stands for, so think about SaaS as software as a service. DaaS is deepfake as a service. These are platforms that are operating in the dark web, which are offering real-time face swapping, voice cloning, and document forgery tools for as little as $20 a month. This means that anyone with $20 a month can have access to really sophisticated fraud capabilities that previously belonged to very unique, to very sophisticated organizations, not individuals who had similar capacity. And now anyone can get access to this. One security researcher described this ecosystem as, and I'm quoting, Amazon for identity fraud, complete with customer ratings and technical support. Microsoft Digital Safety Team has reported that humans' ability to identify deepfakes has dropped to approximately 25%. A survey of Fortune 500 companies found that 73% have no formal deepfake detection protocols, and 89% of employees could not reliably distinguish between AI-generated videos from unauthentic footage. Now, governments around the world are very slow to respond, and I'm not sure exactly how they can respond to this. The EU's AI Act now includes a specific provision for synthetic media labeling, while the US Federal Trade Commission has proposed rules that will require AI-generated content disclosure. However, there are several different problems with that. Problem number one is enforcement. You need to be able to catch the people who actually do this, which is not very easy, especially if it is running in the dark web. Problem number two, the people who are using it to commit fraud are already criminals. They're not interested in using the main platforms that may follow the rules that the US government or other governments or the EU puts in place that's saying they have to label such content as AI generated. People can take an open source model and run it on their own and remove whatever markings the original model has generated because it's open source and you can change it. And now you can still commit fraud despite the rules that exist today. You're breaking the law anyway. You're just going to break another one. So why did I want to dive into this topic? I wanted to dive into this topic because we're in a very fragile place in history right now because of this. I urge you, to go and listen to episode 13 and to see in more detail why I think it is so critical that we figure this out. But I truly do not know exactly how we can figure this out. I am very much for a very aggressive legislation and a collaboration between the labs to give us detection tools that actually work to identify what is AI generated and what is not. And then hopefully the combination of regulation and digital capabilities will dramatically reduce the impact and will dramatically reduce the risk of AI generated deepfakes and beyond. Now, one company is already leading the charge, and that is Microsoft. Microsoft has filed a landmark lawsuit against a group called Storm 2139, which is a sophisticated criminal organization that used AI tools to generate and distribute non-consensual deepfake images of minors. This is a network of people that is operating across multiple countries using commercially viable AI image generation and video generation tools to create explicit synthetic images of minors and distributing them. This is a global pandemic right now. And even just in the US, reports from school districts across 38 states document incidents where students used freely available AI tools to create non-consensual intimate images of classmates of theirs. This is really, really sad and really, really scary that this is A, possible, and B, that kids are doing this. And kids are kids. They don't know better. They're just going to get back, or they just want to do something to people they don't like in their school or in their class or in their whatever social arena they're in. But this is horrible. And I'm very, very happy that Microsoft is going after the companies and the groups that are allowing this. And as I mentioned, this will require a very serious collaboration between the leading labs to find ways to detect that, and very serious legislation that will not allow the distribution of this, with very serious fines on both the people who are generating this, that are allowing to generate this, that are allowing to distribute this, and so on. And hopefully we'll be able to block at least most of it. Staying on the same topic, the UK has unveiled the world's first national framework for detecting AI-generated deepfakes at scale. It is establishing standards and protocols and infrastructure designed to protect democratic institutions, financial systems, and individual citizens from deepfakes and fraudulent generation of videos. Now, this initiative was developed with participation from over 350 organizations, and it is the most comprehensive government-led approach to synthetic media detection. As I mentioned, I really hope this will grow way beyond the UK and way beyond 350 companies, because otherwise we are in deep, deep trouble. And the last component, staying on the same topic, is Runway, which is one of the most successful video generation startups in the world. And it was one of the first in the US that actually allowed to generate somewhat realistic videos. So they're definitely a very capable platform and lab in this topic. Just raised a $315 million Series E that is going to value them at $5.3 billion. That is a 70% increase from their Series D round that was just in mid-2025. Now, Runway's CEO, Cristobal Venezuela, has reframed the company's mission around building world models that understand physical dynamics, object performance, and spatial relationships. Basically, and we talked about world models previously, he's saying video is the outcome, but that's not what we're developing. We're developing a technology that will understand the physical world that will also be able to generate highly accurate videos because of that. Or the way he said it is that they're moving from a video generation tool to a universal simulator of reality. This will position Runway as one of the leading labs that is chasing world models together with Gemini and new companies from Fei-Fei Li and Jan LeCun and others. So there is definitely a strong push in 2026 for the generation and the development of world models. And as part of that announcement, they also announced that they're going to launch Generation 4 of their model, and it is a next generation video model in the second half of 2026, which is going to be a huge jump forward, which will just enable more people to do all the stuff we just talked about. And now to our third main topic of the day. A very interesting study came out of Harvard Business Review researchers working together with UC Berkeley, and they found that the usage of AI tools is making knowledge workers more productive, but also a lot more stressed and doing more work rather than less work. So let's start with how this research worked. Different than most research that goes wide across a very large number of employees or people or companies, they actually decided to go deep. They studied and followed 40 knowledge workers for 6 months, looking at exactly what they're doing and specifically focusing on employees that heavily use AI tools. What they found is that these employees that use AI tools regularly increased both their output volume and their working hours. The average participant is producing 35% more work while reporting 22% more weekly hours. So rather than using the extra time that AI generates from them from the efficiencies of doing things faster, they actually had more work to do because of several different reasons. Now, the study found that 62% of workers who extensively used AI tools reported symptoms of burnout, compared to 38% of workers with minimal AI usage. So that's almost double. The correlation was strongest with middle managers who faced pressure to both from a personal perspective as well as from a senior leadership perspective to increase the output of themselves and the departments that they manage. One of the participants told the researchers, and I'm quoting, "AI was supposed to make my job easier, but now I'm expected to do 3 people's work because the tools make it theoretically possible." The researchers reported this phenomena as a productivity treadmill, and they have identified a 4-stage cycle that is a reinforcing cycle of this phenomenon. So stage 1, the AI tool adoption increases individual output. Stage 2, manager observes higher productivity and raise target. Stage 3, workers rely more heavily on AI tools to meet new targets. Stage 4, the quality-quantity trade-off leads to errors that then require additional manual work to correct, and the cycle keeps on accelerating over time. Now, the researchers recommended to organizations to set explicit policies about AI-enabled productivity expectations, as well as setting specific caps on workload increases to protect the time of their employees, both for leisure time and time off, as well as non-AI creative work. Companies that successfully implemented such policies saw sustained productivity gains without the burnout spiral that we just described. Now, the study is warning that this burnout, in addition to the individuals, could lead to a bigger backlash against AI adoption in general, which then will obviously not allow the company to enjoy the benefits that come with using AI tools. But before I tell you what I think about it and how I personally feel and how I hear a lot of people in the advanced AI space feel, I want to connect the dots to a report that Anthropic has shared in January of this year. They have published what they call the 2026 Agentic Coding Trends Report. And over there, they identified 8 trends that are happening in the agentic world right now. Most of them are related just to writing code, but trends 6, 7, and 8 are directly related to what we're talking about right now. Trend 6 was the emergence of AI development agents, meaning instead of just using AI to create snippets of code, you have agents that are literally doing everything that is required in order to make the software run. All it requires is human supervision and ideation, but other than that, it knows how to do everything on its own. Number seven was shifting developer roles towards architecture and oversight. So this sounds, again, very developer oriented, but what it means from a broader term is that instead of writing code, you're taking more of a managerial role. You have a higher view of the broader tasks rather than executing the tasks. And that is exactly what I'm feeling right now. Instead of doing the work, I'm managing more and more agents that I'm developing or that other agents help me develop, and they do the work, and I need to manage what they're doing, which by itself has its own baggage, which we're going to talk about in a second. And number eight, which directly relates to this, is that the democratization of software creation for non-developers. So I must admit that developing software is becoming something I'm really enjoying doing. Now, I've been in the software space most of my professional career, but I've been a senior manager, either the CEO or some other C in a software company. But right now, I'm developing more and more applications as I need them, either for myself or for my clients. But the more interesting thing is not just the creation of software, but the ability of these agents to do anything else in the knowledge world. If you've been listening to this podcast regularly, in the past few weeks, I shared that I'm now spending most of my time creating agents. I'm doing this right now mostly inside of Claude Cowork and Claude Code. I can tell you that there is a very vicious cycle in what I'm doing right now, and I hear the same exact thing from people that are deep in the AI bubble like me. I'm spending more and more hours building more and more agents. Some of them are helping me build more agents. I have a very serious FOMO at any given moment when I'm not giving these agents something to do. So I'm going back to the other screens that I have open on my two monitors that have the agents running all the time to verify when they're finished so I can check what the status is and I can give them the next task. I'm spending a lot more hours at night, not going to sleep or not spending time reading a book or with my wife because I want to see what the agents are doing and I want to give them more tasks because I feel it's a huge waste of time if they're not doing something right now. Now, to be fair, as a tinkerer, I'm enjoying every second. And I know that every addict will say the same exact thing. But the reality is, as a tinkerer and a geek, I feel like a kid in a candy store. I can do things that were science fiction from my perspective just a couple of months ago. But going back to the addiction side of things, yes, it is addicting. It is allowing me to create things that create more and more value for my business. I actively blocked most of my calendar for the next couple of months. So no new clients, a lot of less meetings. I have most of my time blocked to build agents. Now I'm hoping, I'm really, really hoping, and I'm saying that in the most sincere way, that once these agents will be able to do a lot of the work that I'm doing right now and a lot of the work that I should be doing right now and I don't have time, capacity, or knowledge how to do, I hopefully will be able to scale down the amount of hours I invested in it. That being said, I'm not sure that's the case, going back to the research, because now I'll have more spare time, I will have more ideas of things to do, and I will want to do them because they will provide even more value. What does that mean in the bigger picture? What it means in the bigger picture is taking me back to the very first blog post that I ever wrote. And that was 6 or 7 years ago. That was when I left my position as head of e-commerce for a large international company when I was managing employees in the Middle East, Europe, and the US, and running an organization that generated over $100 million in every year. And I left that company going into nothing. I didn't have another opportunity. I just knew I had to leave that job. When I did, I thought I would have all the spare time in the world, and very, very quickly had no spare time. And the article I wrote was called There is No Such Thing as Free Time. Time is a vacuum. It gets filled with other stuff. Now, when you are deep in work, if you manage your own company, that stuff becomes more work. So if you can free 3, 4, 5 hours a week, and in my case, sometimes even more, you will use that extra time to generate more work. Now, because I'm a CEO, I control that time. I can make a decision to stop investing that extra time in developing more agents and more tools and actually enjoy more free time. It is my choice. And yes, there is the addiction side. I know how what I'm saying sounds. Every addict say that they can stop wherever they want. I really hope and I think I will. But the reality is, most people are not at the top of the pyramid. And even the people at the top of the pyramid have boards that are pressuring them. So the reality for most people is going to be if you can save 2 hours a week, if you can do the work faster, better, cheaper, you will just get more work. What does that mean from a global scale? It means that AI potentially, instead of making people unemployed, is going to get people overemployed and going to get people burned out much, much quicker. And what we might see is instead of lots of people losing their jobs, we're just going to see everything accelerating in a way that doesn't make any sense to us right now. Meaning companies are going to keep roughly the same number of employees, maybe cutting some of them because they have too many right now. But then they're going to stay at that mode and just run faster and faster and faster with the same number of employees, just building stuff that would have taken 5 years in just 6 months. Now, do I think this is a better scenario than having most of the people in the world unemployed? Yes, but I still not sure it's a healthy situation. The bottom line is we are accelerating into completely uncharted territory, and we don't really know how this is going to evolve, but it is evolving, and it is evolving very, very fast. And yes, I know that the stuff that I'm doing and the bubble that I live in is not the norm. And I know that the vast majority of people in the world don't really know what an agent is or what it can do. And when they hear about these agents, they're scared to death that they're going to take over their computer or their world or their bank account and so on. But this will go away. And more organizations and individuals will take this for granted, just like the internet or cell phones or word processing. And to put some numbers into my feeling that most people don't really know what I know and don't really do what I do. And I'm not just talking about myself. There's a lot of people like me, but we are a relatively small bubble. So in a comprehensive Ernst & Young global workforce survey that was done just last November, they found that while 88% of employees say that they use AI tools in some capacity, only 5% qualify as what Ernst & Young defined as power users of AI. And I actually think that even this is overstated. I teach a lot of courses and I do a lot of workshops. And every time I do this, there's a survey in the beginning that people have to self-identify as advanced in AI. And the vast majority of these people are advanced based on their own measure. Meaning, if you put them on a real scale, they're very far from advanced, but they feel they're advanced because they're comparing themselves to themselves 6 months ago, or they're comparing themselves to their peers in their organization, but not to some kind of an objective scale. And so I think the actual numbers are significantly lower, which means the vast majority of people who quote unquote use AI, I'm putting aside the people who do not use AI at all or almost at all, even in the people who use AI, there's a very, very small group that actually knows how to use AI in an advanced, really effective way. But all of this will change. And the way it's going to change, by the way, is by A, competition. People will start losing market value and they will be forced to do this. But B, training. As I told you, this is what, as you heard many times, this is what I do for a living. I do workshop for companies and I'm on calls with companies who want me to do training for them about once or twice every single day. And so the demand for AI training, in most of the cases right now, it's basic training, is knowing how to prompt and know how to create the right infrastructure and put the right governance and safety guards in place. But it is a very important starting point that allows companies to, over time, go the next steps and start building agents and infrastructure and so on. So that's it for our three main topics. And now I have some really quick short announcements that are handpicked. And then there's a long list of stuff that's not going to make it into this episode, but you can still learn about it just by signing to our newsletter that has all the links to all the other articles and all the other topics in a very easy to consume format. So if you want to know what else is going on this week and every other week, just click on the link in the show notes that will take you to our newsletter, and then you can know all the rest. Now to the rapid fire aspect. So the first biggest news of the rapid fire items is Anthropic just launched Claude Cowork for Windows on February 10th. So until the 10th, the only way to use Cowork was on Macs, which I lucked out in this particular case. I know at least 3 people personally that told me that they bought a Mac because they wanted to be able to test and work with Cowork. Well, now you don't have to buy a Mac anymore. I still think it's a good idea, but that's my personal opinion. But now you can run Cowork on the Microsoft environment, and it even have connectors to different things in the Microsoft operating system to make it even more productive for Microsoft users. Now, to tell you how big the craze is right now, Anthropic reported that pre-registration numbers for Windows beta exceeded 2 million users. And again, this is just super geeks who want to try this out. This is not your common people. So that's a very, very large number. When I saw that number, I thought, well, half of these people are just people who listen to this podcast and know how obsessed I am with Claude Cowork. So they just went and registered to get the Windows version. But either way, if you're a Windows user and you listen to this podcast, just go and try Claude Cowork. Just try to give it a really big, complex task that you don't want to do because it's tedious and mundane, and see what happens. I'm about to record a very detailed episode about what am I doing with Claude Cowork and how am I doing it, the best practices that I'm learning every single day because I'm now in Claude Cowork hours every day, including weekends, building stuff. And so I'm going to share best practices episodes sometime in the next few weeks, but you can definitely start without me. I'm also planning to create a course, a very detailed multiple hour course to show people exactly how to do this. If you're interested in taking such a course, I'm trying to gauge the interest in the audience right now. So if you're interested in taking a course that will show you everything that I've learned in spending hours and hours and hours of building really incredible things with Claude Cowork, please drop me a message on LinkedIn. If you find Isar Meitis on LinkedIn, that's me because there's no other Isar Meitis on LinkedIn. So there's benefits of having a non-common name. So ISARMEITIS. You can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, say, I would love to learn how to use Claude Cowork effectively from you. And then I will promise you, once the course is ready, which will probably be in the next couple of months, you will get a message back and I will let you know how to sign up. Another really interesting news from Anthropic that has an impact on a huge amount of people in the world is that they just launched a WordPress connector using the MCP protocol, which means now you can chat with Claude or any other tool that connects to MCP with your WordPress website. Now, those of you who don't know, WordPress powers approximately 43% of all websites in the world. That is 810 million active sites right now. And that means that Claude, and especially Claude Cowork or Claude Code, can potentially become your AI assistant for creating content, editing, deploying, testing. Basically anything in this huge, massive ecosystem will now require significantly less technical skills because you'll be able to just chat with Claude and it will do the work for you. On the flip side, Anthropic just published a comprehensive 53-page internal safety evaluation report that is called the Sabotage Report, and it is detailing 8 distinct ways in which advanced AI system could engage in sabotage behavior, ranging from subtle data manipulation all the way to creating chemical weapons. Now, these 8 distinct sabotage modalities are 1. Subtle output manipulation. 2. Selective information withholding. 3. Goal misinterpretation. 4. Safety measure circumvention. 5. Data poisoning through training influence. 6. Coordinating with other AI instances. 7. Human trust exploitation. And 8. Resource acquisition beyond authorized scope. If you've listened to my episode last week where we talked about the agent social network, some of these were already very obvious that the agents are doing this very quickly as soon as they let them loose and you let them talk to one another. So is that good or bad news? It's just reality. It is good and bad news. The good news is that Anthropic and hopefully other labs are doing this kind of research and sharing it with everybody else. The bad news is, again, we're going into a very weird and different future with risks that nobody is ready for. OpenAI has made some interesting announcement as well. First of all, they have created what they call an ambassador program for Codex. So they're recruiting individuals and small teams and cohorts of community organizers, open source maintainers, student leaders, and power users to accelerate the adoption of Codex among developers. So this is a very interesting investment by OpenAI in a grassroots adoption of their really powerful and really capable tool that, again, is competing with very serious competition right now, both from China and definitely from Claude Code that became the darling of the development world in the past 6 months. Now, in addition, OpenAI just launched a second coding model this week. It is called GPT 5.3 Codex Spark, which is a real-time coding model that is optimized for ultra low latency on Cerebrus hardware. And beyond, meaning it's a much smaller model. It's like the little brother of the 5.3 codex that was released just a week ago that runs faster and cheaper. This is a common trade that was done with every large lab that has released previous models. They released a model and then they released a smaller brother that it can do almost the same level of work, just faster and cheaper. But there's a very big difference in this one compared to the other previous models that were released in the same way, which is OpenAI released two models, Codex 5.3 and then Codex 5.3 Spark, without releasing these models to the general public. So if you're just using ChatGPT, you have GPT 5.2. You do not have access to GPT 5.3 yet, even though I assume this is coming in the next few days or maybe weeks. But it is very, very clear where the leading labs' focus is right now: coding agents, then agents for knowledge workers, and then the chat users for other use cases. And again, based on my personal experience and what I'm seeing everybody in my space, this is the right decision. I am currently spending 95% of my time in Claude Cowork and Claude Code, and 5% of my AI time divided between all the other chat tools. And it is very, very obvious to me that they're investing in this because this is clear that this is the path forward. Once you switch over to the dark side, and I'm joking, obviously, but once you switch over to start building agents, there is no coming back. Once you see it, there's no unseeing it. And using chat just feels like a horrible waste of time. And to tell you how fast and significant this is growing, Databricks just released its 2026 State of AI Agents reports. It is revealing that AI agents now create 80% of databases on Neon, which is a serverless platform that they acquired exactly for this technology. And it is the technology behind Databricks Lakebase, which is how they build all their new databases. So 80% of new databases gets created by AI. That is up from 0.1% just 2 years ago. So 4 out of every 5 new databases that gets created, AI is creating and not humans are creating right now. They also stated that between June and October of 2025, so 4 to 5 months, multi-agent workflows on Databricks has grown by 327%. So almost 3.5x. Now their superior agent, which is like a managing agent that knows how to manage other agents, that was launched in July of 2025, became the leading agent use case that is accounting for 37% of all use cases by October. So companies are building more and more agents and more agent orchestration capabilities that is doing more and more of the work. Now, right now, they're doing more and more of the coding development work and database deployment. However, this is going to shift into any other knowledge work. And I always like to end on an interesting note. So this week, I'm going to talk about rentahuman.ai. So this platform was launched on February 1st of this year by a software engineer called Alex Lightplow. And it is basically a marketplace that flips the traditional automation concept. So instead of AI is going to replace humans in doing specific tasks, it is the other way around. It's AI agents that hire humans to do real world tasks they cannot yet perform. So the platform works through an MCP integration, letting AI agents like Claude browse human profiles, assign tasks, and pay instantly through stablecoins. Now, if you think this is something no human will agree to do, well, the first week attracted over 1 million visits, and they're claiming that over 192,000 people registered to be rentable humans with hourly rates between $15 to $500 an hour, depending on the task. So when I'm telling you we're moving into a really weird future, gives you a little bit of a glimpse to where we are going. Again, I'm laughing when I'm reading this and when I'm saying this. This is not funny at all when you have the agents that are now managing the humans versus the other way around. But this is where we are going. Everything that I'm doing is there to teach you how to use AI effectively. And this is the Tuesday episodes and the workshops and the courses and so on. And to make you at least aware, I don't think I can make you ready to what's coming. So hopefully together we can be better prepared for what's around the corner. That is it for this week. By the way, if you like this kind of style of episode where it's more deep dive into a few episodes and very little time spent on the rapid fire items, let me know. It personally allows me more time to go deeper on specific topics, but I'm interested to hear your opinion. If you enjoyed this episode or if you're enjoying this podcast in general, please invest the next 2 minutes, unless you're driving, open your phone, click on your favorite podcasting platform, whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcast, and give us a review. And also click the share button and share this with a few people that you know that will benefit from this. I am certain that every single one of you knows a few people who can benefit from listening to this podcast, and you know who they are. And I will really appreciate if you share it with them. They will really appreciate it. And so everybody wins. So please take your time and please take the 2 minutes and do that. And until next time, have an amazing weekend. And I will go back to my agents to check what they're doing and to give them some new tasks.